Most CEOs and HR directors are tired. You're probably one of them. You've spent millions on leadership initiatives, but the culture, it just hasn't shifted. And the performance of your managers and your leaders just hasn't improved. It feels like the leadership training that you've done is just not working. It might even feel like a bit of a hit or miss game where you're constantly trying new things and just throwing content at a wall, hoping something will stick and move the needle. But really, you feel like you're just throwing money down an endless pit with no tangible return on that investment for the training investment you've made. And every time you do it, it gets harder to get budget to do something newer or better and trendier with a new expert hook or a certified fly-by-night provider. I know this because I was part of the problem. I remember being in Bulgaria. I remember facilitating this fantastic high-energy 3-day manager training class for new managers in Sofia in Bulgaria. It was in the mid-2010s. The room was really excited. The managers were totally fired up. I can be pretty entertaining in front of a group. And as we were saying goodbye and having had a great time, one of the people in my class, he opened the door, and who was standing outside but his manager? And this was not a happy manager. It was somebody and he actually said, "Where have you been? I have been looking for you. We've got a client emergency, come." And he dragged this poor guy away. And as he walked down the corridor, I could almost see all the learning and the motivation and the enthusiasm leaking out of him as he walked. Knowledge and motivation wasn't the problem. The environment that he was returning into was. It's a lot like cooking. I can go on a long course to understand and practice and research and get all the tips and tricks on how to cook Asian cuisine. And I can feel very motivated to cook Asian cuisine. But then when I come back home into my own kitchen, I can try Asian cuisine, but then I'm faced with my family who don't really like Asian cuisine. And they don't really want the flavors, they don't like the textures, they don't like the tools. That's not their thing. And so I very quickly give up my Asian cuisine motivation and revert back to cooking what my environment rewards me for. The meals that people go, "Oh, yum, that was great, thanks, Mom." It's a lot like that for behavior change. We send people on courses to learn new tools, learn new techniques, and yet they come back into the workplace and the environment rewards the old. And so the new is abandoned. Another reason this doesn't work is even if you are committed to longer-term transformational leadership development, internal teams seldomly have the stick-to-itiveness that's required to start and finish something. The dead bodies of projects that started and then died are all over boardrooms across the world, where great initiatives went to die. I know this because I was part of it. Together with a colleague, we designed a fantastic 18-month acceleration journey for executive talent. And at the beginning, we had a lot of enthusiasm from the 30 or so participants, and we had a good 5 or 10 executive sponsors. And there was lots of attendance and participation, but 3 months in, 5 of our senior leaders had been taken into a new direction. Half the participants were reassigned and it was no longer important for them. And by the end of the 18 months, it was just me and the other HR person who was still committed to that accelerated experience. Because internally, we just get distracted. We get reprioritized. There's something new that comes down in the organization. It's not wrong. It just means we don't have that perseverance needed when we're inside, which is why partnering with an external makes sense. Because as externals, as partners outside the organization, we're not derailed by the internal mechanisms, the systems, the processes, the strategies, the delisting, the restructure. We're not affected by that. So we keep going regardless. In fact, in one of my clients, our groups were telling us that it's the one thing in their life that's constant, is being part of the leadership journey that we're working with them on. That was what was constant in a time of tremendous change. Additionally, we've got to think about the systemic friction. When a manager comes back from a 2-day training to an inbox of 500 emails and a boss who only cares about today's issues, they always revert to the behavior that the system rewards. Most training is designed for the classroom and not for the trenches of a medium-sized organization. The real problem is the system, not the knowledge. Leadership failure is almost never about not the right knowledge. It's a system and an application issue. We promote technical specialists because they're brilliant at their jobs, but then we drop them into a management role without changing the container around them. Because we're external, we aren't distracted by your internal town halls or your compliance training. We can then look at the system more objectively. And we can work on that container. We can hold those upliners accountable because they are co-owners of harnessing the return on investment of learning. If an upline manager isn't willing to protect the learning environment and the learning investment, the participant shouldn't even be on the learning. What works is a methodology. It's not an intervention, it's a method. And a method that starts with a 7-point engagement strategy of the manager of the learner, because they are ultimately responsible for creating that container where the learning is applied. And it's their responsibility to create that environment where they can gather the return on investment of learning. Learning that's known as knowledge but isn't applied is completely pointless. It's like having a stack of recipe books that you have read but you've never cooked. There's no point in that. You don't gather any return on investment. The second thing that's quite different in how we approach this learning is we use coaching in the reflective sense. When we bring people together, we are asking them what they have done. What was their insight? What was their point of application? What was the lesson that they learned from what they have done? Not standing together in a circle and committing to what you will do. That's a fundamental difference. So our group times together are very engaging, very participative, but also highly accountable. And we know this works. We know it works because we've done it in multiple clients, and we have a measurable impact on employee engagement, performance, and retention. Not just of the managers who are part of our learning, but of the people that they lead. The direct people that they are managing and leading are also showing the exact same changes. So this is a high-stakes conversation, because when you don't do this, the cost isn't just about money down the drain. There is attrition, there is presenteeism, there is lower engagement, because managers are responsible for creating the container for their team to perform. And when managers tolerate low performance, it is the high performers that pay the cost. When a manager refuses to have an awkward conversation because they are ill-equipped and they feel uncomfortable. They don't want to hurt someone's feelings. It is the high performers who pick up the slack, and they are the ones that burn out. And that's where you have a talent leakage. Even if they don't leave, they're psychologically decommitting to the organization. Likewise, managers who are moved into positions where they are responsible for the performance of others and yet way more comfortable doing the work themselves, they will step back into that specialist trap. And instead of helping other people fix the problems, they fix them themselves. And that means nobody else is growing, and that manager is so busy doing that there's nobody leading. Employees who work for a manager like that are themselves disengaged, and they're looking for places that will encourage their own growth, see them growing and developing skills. Skill development is one of the most sticky things in organizations today. And if you are not growing as an individual because your manager is too busy doing your job for you, you're looking for other places to work. Wasting money on ineffective training programs is the tip of the iceberg for a business, with way more dangerous impacts lurking unseen below the surface. Every time a HR team or an L&D team launches a new flavor of the moment initiative that disconnects from the previous one and is devoid of any strategic intent, their credibility with the board takes a hit and money for training dries up because of a lack of measurable results. We stop that by offering a refund, 100% money back refund guarantee, because if our systemic and sustainable approach to developing leadership skills across the organization doesn't move the needle on measurable outcomes like engagement and performance, we haven't done our job. If any of this resonates with you, you probably don't need more training. You need to understand where your leadership system is breaking. And to help you do that, we have a leadership diagnostic hosted on the SCORE app that gives you a baseline of your leadership leverage in just 2 minutes. It's a very easy tool to navigate, and it helps you see the risks before you commit to your next growth cycle. You can find the link below this video, and you can start to see where your system is breaking so that we can start building a container that actually holds.